Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory in 1957. Here we are with the Blu-ray, of course, another Stanley Kubrick review, and yes, this is the Master of Cinema, spy number 155, so yes. This film, of course, comes after The Killing, which I reviewed, and I thought that was actually a masterpiece. Not a lot of people would say that, well, a bit more now, but rightfully so, yes, not regarded as one of his best, purely because Stanley Kubrick, well, for me, is the greatest director of all time, and yes, basically, he would reach, many heights, throughout his career. After this, The Killing, and of course, yes, they were so good. Example being 2001: Space Odyssey, that kind of, of course, the films like The Killing would be down at the bottom quite a lot, and this one, it's actually usually in the top five. To be honest, if people as well, find him buried in to be underrated and stuff, and that isn't in the top five, this one will be most likely. It is known to be one of the best Kubrick films, kind of reviews, critics and kind of fans. IMDb, I believe it's got an 8.4. And it just scores higher everywhere. Than most of his films as well. It's not really a controversial film, so it's not a Clockwork Orange where you've kind of got. Of course, some people out there don't really like the film. Some people hate it, get offended and stuff. This one is not really any of that. It's kind of not safe, but it's an anti-war film, but also one actually that kind of it does show the bravery and stuff of the actual soldiers, but the actual people higher up and the actual overall attitude and stuff. It is an anti-war film. So yes, basically, it's French soldiers who are kind of. They're tasked to kind of take the anthill. It's 1916, World War One, and it's kind of a bit of narration at the beginning, and kind of saying how now they're kind of stuck in this situation. The Germans, they can't really advance and stuff like that, and it's an anthill which they're tasked to take. And Colonel Dax is tasked really to lead this charge, of course, by Captain Meyer, and basically yes, played by George Macready, and he basically says you've got to do this and stuff, and it's kind of known to be an impossible task, really, at least without risking the lives of most of his men. Of course, they talk about the casualties, and stuff, and basically saying that more than half his men, Kirk Douglas's men, will die in taking this hill, and most of the rest of them as well, by holding the hill. So basically, it's a it's showing, of course, the kind of horrors of war, and the kind of inhumanity as well of it all, kind of, and it deals with morals and stuff. It does tap into kind of the spiritual side as well later on in the film. And yes, it's basically an anti-war film, pretty simple, and one, of course, that has really been known as one of the best kind of war films. Of course, Kubrick technically made 3 war films, because if you include Doctor Strangelove, although that's more of a comedy than anything, it is a war film in a way, and of course Full Metal Jacket, and actually most people would say that this is better than both of them. You kind of got Doctor Strangelove pretty close there in terms of acclaim. I actually think this is the worst of the 3, and I don't think it's one of the best Kubrick films, but I do think it's a masterpiece. So there we have it. Yes, although it's one of my least favourite Kubricks, one of my very least favourites, I think it is a stunning film, and I understand how it's so loved. It's my 4th viewing now, and the first time I saw it, I was blown away, really. It's probably it was before I'd seen Eyes Wide Shut, and of course The Killing, and yes, I think that was it. Yeah, of the ones that I'd left, and basically. Yeah, Lolita as well. I only saw that last year for the first time, and yes, basically this one really blew me away. I didn't think it was as good as his other works, really, that I'd seen up to that point. By far, I think they're better, but really, it really did blow me away. And once again, a film that I absolutely loved. Another kind of one to tick off of Kubrick films that I did absolutely love. It was such a powerful film. The acting is absolutely astounding, and of course the direction and everything is absolutely flawless. The editing really is something else. A very, very short film again, like The Killing, so it kind of has, for me, the disadvantage, it's not a big epic like Barry Lyndon or something like 2001, and yes, of course, many people say this is by far the best of the 2 Kirk Douglas Kubrick films. I disagree. I think Spartacus It is a better film, and I do prefer it. But yes, basically, it blew me away. It was so human, and yes. Is this like the rest of the other Kubrick films? Not really at all. I think there is a couple of shots here and there, the trademarks. In terms of the style, it's a bit more there than The Killing to his later works. Doctor Strangelove onwards, really. We're talking about here. But in terms of the way that the film is approached, and the content, and the actual overall, the way it has the messages, the way they come about, and just many other things. Even the script, I think, is very, very different to what Kubrick. Really, I picture of Kubrick, and what really most people do as well. I think it is more of a just a great war film that happens to be made by Kubrick. He's got his kind of own touches on it. The slightly dark cinematography at times, the use of shadows in these early ones, and just generally kind of the comedy definitely. It is a satire at times. It really is actually a hilarious film, and it has a lot of underlying kind of satire in there. Of course, General Meru is really one of the most evil people, evil villains in cinema, but he is as well, of course. It's the obscene kind of nature of what, how he's so evil and stuff that it's meant to be funny. I feel, it's kind of meant to go really, really far to kind of get that, and of course, yes, just many moments throughout the film which would do actually, induce comedy. You could say less so, the second half of the film, but even then, there's an underlying kind of satire to it all, and the kind of how they're kind of petulant, a lot of the officers, all this kind of stuff, the generals, and it's basically, in a way, it's kind of parodying and satire just people higher up in the chain of command, and how things are handled, how things are managed, and it's just a very, very petty nature at times of war, you could say, and of course, it really is a powerful film. And of course, these three soldiers, of course, after the kind of the failure of kind of taking the Ant Hill, they are kind of eventually they agree to kind of take three soldiers, kind of make an example of them. They have to be tried, and eventually, of course, it leads to the execution towards the end of the film. And of course, most of the film is Kirk Douglas kind of trying to basically kind of stop this, and kind of just show the humanity of it all. And I'm not going to say if it goes down at the end. Of course, if you've not seen the film, watch the film. But yes, there is, of course, that's what's meant to happen. These three guys, I'm not going to say who, and of course, yeah, it all leads up to the kind of the finale, and you've got a wonderful kind of extra scene at the end, of course, with Kubrick's soon-to-be wife, who does, of course, it's just in a wonderful scene there. It's stunning, that scene, it really is. I'm not going to get into that, because again, spoilers, but let me tell you, the way this film ends is really, really moving, of course. And just, again, actually uplifting as well, and the way it kind of shows, yes, how it kind of changes everyone in that scene. It really is stunning. Again, not really how Kubrick would end his films. Most of his films would end on a disturbing note, or more. Yeah, most of them do end in a disturbing way, you could say, at least from the films onwards, after Doctor Strangelove. 2001, you could say, is probably the most optimistic ending. Really, actually, that's not disturbing at all, apart from maybe the creepiness of the kind of the Star Child. But yes, basically, this film is so wonderfully directed. The way this film was shot, of course, Kubrick kind of showing flares, of what he would soon kind of do. In most of his films, the tracking shots, just the alignment of everything in the scene. The way he moves the camera, it's so precise, so kind of flowing, and of course, just absolutely, it's just so meticulous, and it just works perfectly. The scene where Kirk Douglas is walking through the trenches, wow, that really just gives me, shivers every time. But again, the later Kubrick films, I guess he maybe would have added more music in that scene. I think actually, again, compared to his later ones, it's not quite there in terms of the mind-blowing stuff that he kind of done. There isn't much music in this film, really, and many people have praised that, and I think, it works just as good as he could have got it here without music. I think, well, there's some music in there, but I think if it had been, how he used music in 2001, for example, and later films, yes, I would have taken that. I think he really he knew how to kind of use music, better than anyone actually exists in music in cinema. Once he developed, and uses of music throughout the film would have probably made it even better and elevated it higher. Not that it's a flaw, but yes, there are so many great scenes in this film. And of course it is. It's got some great action scenes as well. The charge, of course, the first charge to the anthill is really, really something else. And just the way that kind of the tracking shots again, the kind of the scale of this, and as well showing the kind of the sadness of when the tragedy of people falling, in battle. And yes, it's a very, very small budget, this film, and it doesn't really affect the film at all. It really is a stunning film. It's so well made. Again, just showing that if you know how to kind of shoot a film and you have a great script and all this kind of stuff, which of course Kubrick, co-written by Kubrick, then you can't really go wrong. Even when the budget is not that much, because it wasn't much, it was less than $1 million, I believe. And yes, it's just a great, great film. I think the acting is stunning. Kirk Douglas is, a great, great actor, of course. I think he's even better than Michael Douglas. Both are great. And of course, in this film, he is perfect. Such an emotional performance. One, of course, this is where you see the kind of humanity. Most of the film comes through him, comes through Kirk, and his kind of character of Colonel Dax, and just constantly trying to fight to kind of for humanity, for these free men's lives, and it's just, of course, something which many of the other guys, kind of in charge, are debating as well. There's many trial scenes and kind of debates about this, and it's just in this sense it really explores the value of life, and as well, of course, how stupid it is really at times for shooting people, or kind of doing things to people that cowardice kind of thing. It's just, it goes into that, of course. Very, very powerful film in that sense, and it really sends a lot of messages. Very, very simple messages, but really so powerful. And yes, just a very, very emotional kind of last act of the film. Definitely the best act of the film, and yeah, just really a perfect film for me. I don't really have any flaws with it. I think the characters, there's comedy in there with them. There's characters you care about. Of course, even just some of the minor characters, some of the soldiers, really are so well written, and the acting is great. Of course, Tim Carey, again, brilliant. Really want to see more films with him in it. He was a great actor. Really, just such a presence and energy. And in this film, again, more emotional, but still very, very kind of out there, kind of not over the top, but of course he was an actor that kind of done that. But I love him for it, and yes, just a great performance from him. Just everyone involved really in this film. Of course, the editing is just wonderful. It has such a flow and a sharpness at times as well with the action scenes, and it's just really, it's just a stunning film. I have no flaws with it. If you've not seen this film, it's so powerful, and I'd highly recommend it. And yes, for me, it is one of the, among the greatest war films, and definitely one of my 500 favourite films. So taking everything into account, the cinematography, the direction, just the way this film, kind of builds and builds, and it has, such powerful messages. The acting is really flawless. The villain is one of the most memorable in film, although of course he's meant to be one-sided kind of thing. And of course, the comedy that comes into this, once again, is here. It really is perfect use of comedy, kind of black comedy there, and just all the satire elements in the film are just so well kind of weaved in there. And yeah, it's just a brilliant, brilliant film. It's very, very moving at the end, of course. It's such a stunning film. The acting, of course, really plays a hand in that. Kirk Douglas, an absolute legend, really was. Not his best performance, but very, very, you could say maybe in some ways close, but I think Spartacus is his best performance that I've seen from him. And yes, just a wonderful performance. Constantly a character who keeps trying, he keeps trying, and, whether or not he's successful, find out. But really, the whole point is, that is the whole thing, and the fact that he keeps trying to do this, to kind of save these people's lives, and of course, kind of, he's kind of a character who gets obstacles in his way, and it's a struggle, for him to kind of get through. different things in the film, and of course with that we root for him, and we go through this as well. And yes, it's just a wonderful contemplation as well of life. I think these scenes, very very spiritual near the end of the film, and the actual kind of final act is absolutely stunning. I think it's a human film. It's got comedy in there as well, and it's just such a powerful one at the same time. Of course, this film gets full marks from me. It doesn't quite get into my plus tiers, but that's just like The Killing. I still love the film. I think reason it doesn't get into my plus tiers. It's just it happens to me. Kind of nearly 200 films. Well, 200 films that I like more than this at least. Actually, it's not quite in my top 200. Neither is The Killing, but they are pretty close. And this film. It's mind blowing, really is. Is it as good as most of Kubrick films? For me, no. That's just my opinion. Many people would say it's one of the very best. Even top 3. But for me, definitely not. I stand by that. I think while it is a masterpiece, it doesn't quite. Well, it really doesn't get elevate, or it's not as good as some of the other ones for me personally. I think Full Metal Jacket's better than this. I think. It is a masterpiece, though, nevertheless, and I have to give it 100%. Not a plus, of course, but yes. This film, highly recommend it. It's wonderful, beautiful film. The way it's shot, edited, directed to perfection, and it's just wonderfully acted. The script is really so sharp. It's just so much dialogue that is just so engaging, just as well. All the use of narration in the film is kind of used to better effect maybe than you could say in The Killing. And I'm not going to say which I prefer out of the two films there, The Killing and this. I think I simply have to wait to the ranking. Again, it is actually pretty close between them. But yes, this is one of the my least favourite Kubrick films. But again, it is a masterpiece. And for sure one of the best war films. I think probably not in the top 10, maybe not, but it is a stunning film, and the acting. It's perfect, the direction is flawless, and it's just a wonderful film that really elevates to levels that move me. It's very very deep and personal, and just a film that yes, it's not really like in many ways it's not really like Kubrick. I mean, the way he stages people, kind of soldiers and everything, you could say it's kind of hints of that, going through into Barry Lyndon and stuff, Spartacus even, but yes. There is also some tracking shots and just general the way people were staged, kind of slight uneasy feel, but not really staying on the level as Doctor Strangelove. Of course the kind of angles and everything he chooses, subtle hints in here, but not quite on the level, in terms of the style. And yes, it's not quite as good as them, nowhere near as good as the best Kubricks, but for sure a masterpiece. Such a moving film. It's got comedy in there as well, and it's just one where I cared about the characters, and just really got emotionally invested, and it's my 4th viewing now, so of course, yes. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. I think, again, it's not as good as most of his films, but really for me, an absolute masterpiece, one that I'll, be revisiting, again, every year when I do my Kubrick kind of series. I like to do them every year, really, and yes. Can't wait, of course, to kind of review Spartacus, which is next, and even more so a lot of the other films that are coming up. So yes, stay tuned, and yes, thanks for watching my review.